It's with great pleasure that I'm here today in person, because typically I'd have to be virtual. So I'm very thankful. My name's Danae Wilson. I'm with the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, or OSTP. I'm a member of the Nez Perce tribe, and I live and work from the Nez Perce homelands. OSTP is comprised of 6 teams: climate and environment, energy, health and life sciences, national security, science and society, and our technology team. And I'm part of the technology team. And I'm very, very thankful to be here. I have great respect for what NTTA does. And I think that NTTA is leaders in what tribal broadband can become, both telecommunications and ISPs. As I said, I'm part of the technology team, which is led by Alexander A. McGilvray. The mission of OSTP is to maximize the benefits of science and technology to advance health, prosperity, security, environmental quality, and justice for all Americans. So from our point of view, the impact is, what does it do for you in your life, and how do we help that along? So when OSTP came and asked me to work for them, I wanted to know, what are they doing for tribes? And how are we helping tribes? And it was really important to me that I continued to work in Indian country for Indian country. OSTP has ongoing work with Native nations, and it includes the Tribal High-Speed Internet Working Group that Adam Geiser mentioned earlier today. We convene a working group with all federal agencies, and we're identifying interagency collaborative efforts to increase equitable access, use, and adoption, deployment of internet on tribal lands, and we develop inputs on the National Tribal Broadband Plan, identifying existing resources and funding, and how that funding is deployed and what it can be deployed for. What are the rules for deployment, and what does it look like when it hits tribal lands? We'd really like to remove the barriers and enhance deployment opportunities. So what are the barriers? We heard some of that today. We heard some of the things that are issues in Indian country. Our plan is to take into consideration future language that will encompass the known and advanced technology solutions to be considered. So when you think about what's happening in Indian country, we want to be the office that helps take you to the next level. I'm part of the policy team, and the policy team at OSTP is coordinating the whole of government effort to efficiently and strategically use wireless spectrum to support a wide range of national interests, 5G and other connectivity innovations, public safety, and national defense. OSTP is working on engaging aviation technology and national airspace system. So when you think about spectrum, it isn't simply what we do with wireless deployments for broadband and internet. It's what all spectrum is doing and what's happening with all spectrum. Currently, we partner with the DOT to convene an interagency working group to develop national strategy for the integration of new aviation technologies. OSTP has been a host to the AAM Summit, and we convene listening sessions. Another component that isn't with OSTP but is part of the White House team is the Indigenous Knowledge Team. And there are some great leaders, tribal leaders on the Indigenous Knowledge Team. And it's important to know about the different teams that are working in the Executive Office of the President, because they impact what we do in Indian country. The Indigenous Knowledge Team takes environmental standards that tribal leaders and tribes have perfected and have historically passed on from generation to generation, and are using that indigenous knowledge along with science to determine anything that would be federal research, policies and decisions, especially decisions that may affect tribal nations. This Indigenous Knowledge Team has done significant improvements for Indian country. Some of the information on tribal broadband can be found at the fact sheets at the White House at whitehouse.gov. Here's an example of those fact sheets. What happens is when the agencies develop these fact sheets, they're sent to OSTP. We ensure that they encompass everything that's happening in Indian country across agencies, and these white papers are published and presented so that they're accessible to anybody who's interested in knowing what's happening in Indian country. Another example of things that are happening are vice president. Now, in some cases, the vice president has made trips to Indian country to do presentations, and so has NTTA, so has Treasury. When you think about all these big federal dollars coming out, there's always a big presentation, and we want Indian country to be included in those presentations. We want them to come to Indian country and discuss what's happening in Indian country. So some of what we do is to ensure that there is an opportunity for our president and our vice president to make these announcements. The work isn't finished. We need your help to ensure connectivity for all tribal lands is achieved. Areas of concern that tribal input can help develop action plans are road inventories. Now, on the national broadband map, just by a show of hands, how many went and looked up their own address? I did. I went and looked up my own address. I looked up all my family's address. I went and looked up my dad's ranch. I want to know who's claiming to serve Indian country. So if I had access to your address, I would have looked up your address, because I want to know who's claiming Indian country. It should be us. We should be speaking for ourselves. And that national broadband map, that map is going to be used right now. It's for broadband and what's happening in Indian country for connectivity. But I can foresee that being used for other things. So while that may not be this administration's talking point, and that might not be what that map is developed for, you can see that it has far-reaching implications. So we need to make sure that we're our own advocates. Look up your address on the National Broadband map. Look up your family's addresses. Look up your historical lands. If you have a family home, or if you have BIA land in trust, look up those addresses and make sure that what's on that map is accurate. Road inventories are extremely important. In Indian country, the way that funding will be deployed is based on a physical location, a lat long of a house or a premise. So if it's not your home where you're dwelling 24/7, it might be your hunting shack in Alaska, right? Somewhere where you're harvesting it, maybe your traditional harvest lands, where you're there 3 months out of the year doing your traditional harvest. You want to make sure that that address or that lat long is listed on that map so that you can be included and counted when it comes time to connect. And in those state plans that we heard about earlier today, we want to make sure that every premise that you utilize has the ability to be connected to broadband. That leads directly to rural addressing. So when we think about DOT, Department of Transportation, and the money going out for road inventories, we need to ensure that that also includes a component for rural addressing. Many homes in Indian country don't have a house address. When you don't have a house address, it impacts what kind of services you can get. When we think about affordable connectivity program, which we just heard about, we want to ensure that that house address can be included so that you can get the benefit, so that that tribal home can be connected and the subsidy applies to that rural address. It's very important that you look at those national broadband maps as an Indian person living in Indian country, and that you make sure that the information is accurate. And if it isn't, raise a flag. I want to ensure that anybody who needs access to any of the policies that are being produced or put out on behalf of Indian country, that we have a say in what happens. And so it is my hope that you see me as a resource. We want to ensure that whatever is being built out for Indian country on behalf of Indian country includes us. Not somebody making a decision for us, but includes us and lets our voices be heard. Thank you. If there's any questions, I don't know if we have time for any questions, but I'm going to say we do. Does anybody have any questions or comments? If not, I think we're good to go.
For a very short time. So, I mean, what can you do to help me as a tribe? What can your office say, gosh, I'm having these kind of problems. Can I come to you to maybe relay that all the way to the president? Maybe. I don't know. But I'd like to know if you can do that or not.
That's a great question. We heard earlier today about deduplication and what's happening to ensure that there's no deduplication on federal lands or in federal funding over federal lands, over tribal lands. We heard from the Great Plains tribes and we heard from AT&I tribes that the deduplication process wasn't inclusive. It didn't include everything that the tribes needed to validate whether there was duplication or not of federal funds being deployed over tribal lands. So some of those entities contacted me after National Congress of American Indians and said, what do we do when we can't get these maps? What do we do when we don't know somebody applied for funding over our lands and they were funded as a USDA borrower or whatever it may be? We're a resource. So if those questions are raised, we want to ensure that those questions get elevated to the agencies and that the agencies develop a written response so that we're all playing on the same playing field, that we know as tribal nations who's using our tribal lands to receive funding, who's claimed those tribal lands for federal funding, and who's being funded to deploy what type of technologies or what type of services. And so if you are having trouble and you're not sure, you can always email, and I'll leave my email address with Sonia, but it's danae.r.wilson@ostpeop.gov. So I'll leave it because it's not an easy email address. But if you are having troubles and you're not positive who to go to, and I'll use NTTA as a great example. They wrote some comments on a new national broadband plan. I was very thankful to receive those comments, and I shared them with the federal agencies who are helping deploy policies for broadband strategies in Indian country. And that white paper has been used and shared throughout government. Another example is Godfrey called one day and he said, I'm having a hard time finding a POC, a point of contact, for military rights of way. We have a military base near us and we need rights of way. Who do I contact? Who's my point of contact with Department of Defense? So I didn't know, but I know the people who know. So we'll find out. If I don't know and can't provide the answer, there are people in my office who will know, and we can get you the answers you need, get you the contacts that you need.